and we are so excited to have her with us tonight. Sandy, take it away.
Thank you so much, Marie, and thank you to Bent Tree. I am so honored to be a part of your perspectives class again. And since I was with you the last time in person, which seems like a million years ago, doesn't it? I've joined the team with Deliver Fund, and I'm officially a part of the work that we are doing to end human trafficking using data. And I'm going to talk a little bit tonight of what human trafficking looks like in the midst of the crazy that is going on in our world with a pandemic, with social unrest, with people crying out for justice. And I'm going to also give you an update on Deliver Fund. I think the last time I was there with you, I was with Jeremy Mayhew, our Executive Vice President, when he gave a presentation on Deliver Fund. So I'm going to give you a little update as well with that. So I did a PowerPoint, and I'm hoping that we can do a screen share, and I can go through some slides with y'all, if that sounds good. That way you don't have to just watch a talking head the whole time. But I can't tell you how much I appreciate your prayer, Marie, and everybody who's on the call tonight, everybody who's on the Facebook Live. This very much so encourages my heart, because I know that you are dedicated to seeing justice. You are dedicated to seeing an end to slavery in our nation, an end to slavery throughout the world, and true justice reform. So let's go into what I have called, all right, we should pray again for the speaker and for the technical difficulties. So I'm going to do a share screen, and here we go. Is that working?
Yes, it's working.
Awesome. Yay! This is great. Okay, so we're going to talk about the intersection of the faith community and what I refer to as the justice movement. Like Marie said in that very long bio, I'll send you a shorter one next time, a compressed one. I call what we're doing the justice movement, and I've been doing this for over a decade. When I look back at where we started and where we are today, I'm super encouraged. And what I can see in the future, what I can see coming around the corner, and the finish line is out there, I really believe that we will see an end to human trafficking and the buying and selling of bodies and souls in our time. I believe that we are strategically positioned, especially the faith community, to make the difference, to bring freedom, to bring restoration, to bring an end to placing a price on human beings. So you are here. You are in the intersection. You are at the center of justice coming down from the throne in heaven and going across the earth. So thanks for that. Again, thank you for that introduction. I want to make sure that that I do mention with justice that we don't just see justice as human trafficking only. There are three aspects to bringing justice. There is racism, and that is something that the Lord cries out for justice. There is abortion, and that's something else that the cries of the unborn, the Lord is crying out for justice for the unborn as well. And trafficking and slavery. So I really believe that that's an all-encompassing umbrella for what we call the justice movement, but we're going to talk specifically about slavery and human trafficking tonight. So who am I? You already heard off my bio, but first things first, I'm a daughter of God. Without the work that he's done in my life, without the transformation that he's given me, I wouldn't be able to be here today. I wouldn't be able to do a presentation like this. I wouldn't be able to build a PowerPoint or speak in public or any of those things. So I have to first things first give him all the glory and all the credit. I do write truth stories about human trafficking. They are based on true events, based on things that I experienced, and I am a published author, but they're written like, I would compare it to the difference between watching a documentary and watching a movie based on true events. A documentary would be more like a memoir, but I write in a style that's more like watching a movie based on true events. So you're going to get character development and plot development, and it's like watching something happen and getting involved in the story instead of just reading activities or information on a page. So I call them truth stories. Speaking and training is something I'm super passionate about. I've had the honor and the privilege of speaking at universities, at training law enforcement, training medical professionals, concerned citizens, parents that want to know how to protect their kids from becoming victims of human trafficking. And speaking at churches is my favorite. This is my favorite thing because I have good news. The local church is the solution. We are the answer to all of these social issues. We serve the one true living God, and He has not only called us, but He's equipped us and empowered us to do this work on the earth. And that's what leads me into being an abolitionist. I truly believe that through the power that He gives us and the mandate that He's given us in Isaiah 61 and in other places all throughout Scripture, He says that He wants people who are vulnerable to be protected. He wants to see justice. He wants people set free. So I believe as an abolitionist that we will see that come to pass. And then with my role as general advisor for Deliver Fund, I get to work with law enforcement. I get to work with people that are out there on the front lines, arresting traffickers, rescuing victims, and really making the difference in that person's life so that they don't have to be in that situation any longer. So let's talk a little bit more about Deliver Fund. We are a nonprofit intelligence organization, and we're dedicated to seeing an end to human trafficking. So Deliver Fund is a team made up of specially trained individuals who have decades of experience in the CIA, the NSA, other three-letter government organizations. We have Navy SEALs on our team, former law enforcement, FBI on our team. And because of their specialized training in hunting terrorists, especially overseas, and using data and using computers to hunt terrorists, now we have developed programs that mimic what the CIA, what Navy SEALs, what pararescuemen from the Air Force are trained to do. And we've mimicked those systems, and then we empower law enforcement. We train, equip, and advise law enforcement to use that same platform to hunt, arrest, and prosecute human traffickers. And we do it very well. We have a 100% success rate. Every single case that we have physically partnered with law enforcement on, the trafficker has went to prison. That means not only does that trafficker get justice, and he or she should be serving time and seeing justice for the heinous acts that they have done, but the victim or victims that they have been trafficking at the time of their arrest are set free, and then it removes that trafficker from the marketplace so they can't traffic more victims in the future. So we are actionable, scalable, and we really see results with the system that we've put together. So one of my favorite things to talk about when I'm talking about Deliver Fund is where our offices are. Now, right now I'm in my home office. I hung up my American flag right when the Corona crazy started, or COVID-19 started, as a tangible reminder to pray for our country every day. And this is where I like to come and remember that it's important to pray for our nation. It's important to pray for our leaders. But this is my home office. My office downtown Dallas, uptown Dallas, is in the old Backpage offices. Backpage was the largest purveyor of humans for sale for sex at the time. And we, as Deliver Fund, we actually worked with federal law enforcement and with the Attorney General in Texas to put together intel packages to arrest the owners and the leadership of Backpage. One of them is in prison now. The others are awaiting trial, and their building was empty, so we took up residence there. So as one of our analysts says, we're building our kingdom on the skulls of our enemies. So every time I go to my office, I know that that space was literally used to sell children for sex, and now we're using it to train law enforcement to go find the bad guys. It's a very exciting place to work. So I have a lot of respect and admiration for the men and women in Deliver Fund. So this is my logo, I guess, for my website, and authorsandystorm.com. I'm going to refer to some resources, so I wanted to make sure you had access to my website as well as Deliver Fund, and I'll put these back up at the end as well. But I believe that because, as you heard Marie share, I am a survivor of human trafficking. It might have started as a child, but it continued in my teenage years. It continued as I was a young adult. And as an overcomer today, I hope that I can offer inspiration. I hope, if nothing else, that if you pick up nothing else from this presentation tonight, that you're inspired that no matter what circumstances you face, that you can overcome. And especially with the power of the one true living God that we serve, you can really do anything that you set your mind to. You can do all things through him who gives you strength. But I also like to use education. And so we're going to use a lot of facts, figures, educational slides in this presentation, so that way you get not just inspired, but you learn the truth about what trafficking really looks like in the United States today. And finally, I want to empower you. I'm going to give you links to resources. I'm going to empower you with actionable steps that you can take to bring societal change. Because once we do that, once we bring true societal change, I believe we'll see that abolition of human trafficking and the buying and selling of bodies and souls. So everybody has this one question. Like, the biggest question I get when I do these presentations is, how does someone even get involved with human trafficking? Now, I don't know if y'all have been watching social media lately, but apparently if you get too close to Wayfair, you might end up being a victim of human trafficking. If you read my social media feed, there's been a lot of things being shared about Wayfair and Amazon and other websites selling furniture that's really overpriced, that are named after people's names. And a lot of my connections are coming to me saying, have you seen this? Have you seen this? This is human trafficking. Now, my team has investigated those claims, and we see no evidence that Wayfair is selling children for sex or allowing children to be sold for sex on their website. That's very unlikely that is actually happening. Other things that I've seen through social media are zip ties being put on people's windshield wipers or their rear view mirrors of their car, or people being followed through Whole Foods and a white van being parked next to them in the parking lot, and people being followed through Target or Walmart with their kids in a buggy cart, and a bad guy watching them from a distance, that they're just sure and convinced that these are human traffickers that are trying to kidnap their kids and trying to put them on the black market for sale. And unfortunately for the conspiracy theorists, and unfortunately for the people who do get caught up in researching and reading those theories, there have not been any human trafficking cases that I know of through my extensive research and my extensive work in this movement, or that any of the people that I've worked with have heard of, that involve zip ties on car windows or involve Wayfair or any of those other things. But what I want you to be aware of is that there are kids in your community right now, wherever you are. And I know that there are people on this call from we're in Texas. Benttree is in Texas. I'm in Texas. But there are people from other states on this call. And there are children in your communities that are being targeted by traffickers. that are being groomed by traffickers and who are at risk for becoming trafficking victims. So this is a short list of some of the ways that somebody might become a victim. And unfortunately, a trafficker is just going to look for that vulnerability. So if the vulnerability is poverty, a trafficker can answer that vulnerability with money or resources. If the vulnerability is being homeless because of running away or being in the foster care system, a trafficker can answer that vulnerability by providing a place to stay, a hotel room, or a house to sleep in. If the vulnerability is drug use, alcohol addiction, traffickers will exploit that vulnerability by providing drugs and alcohol to the vulnerable teenager or the vulnerable young adult. A lot of that misinformation, like we were just talking about, or the being uninformed, is another vulnerability. Because if our kids are walking around, if all of the 13 and 14-year-old vulnerable kids are walking around thinking they're only going to be trafficked, they're only going to be targeted by traffickers if they're on Wayfair.com, or if there's a zip tie on their car window, then they're not really looking at the vulnerabilities that are right in front of them. So a history of abuse and neglect, coming from a fatherless family, all of these things can cause vulnerabilities that traffickers could exploit. And unfortunately, and I'm talking to the church now about the fatherless family, as the local church, we're called to answer those vulnerabilities. But unfortunately, fatherlessness is one of the biggest issues plaguing our nation today. When a father is removed from the family, whether it's through death, that's what happened to me when I was like 5 years old. My father died. So he wasn't there to be the covering for our family. He wasn't there to be the provider and the protector. It left my mother as a widow, and it left me as an orphan. But there's a quote that I read recently that said, this is the first time in our nation that we're raising more fatherless families than we ever have before, and the dads aren't away at war. They're right down the street. They don't even know their families. They're not participating in the day-to-day activities of their kids growing up and providing for those important needs for their children and for their families. So this is a hot button issue that I have good news. The church is a big part of the answer and the solution for this. Because as the local church, we're called to provide for those practical needs, right? We're called to provide for, food, shelter, the practical needs that a family might have. But we're also called to provide for the spiritual needs, for the counseling if a marriage is in crisis. We're also called to address issues like poverty, issues like somebody losing their job. So we can be part of mending this split and bringing the family back together. And a solid family unit isn't the only solution, but it's part of the solution. And as the church, just being the church, you're doing so much when you're having marriage counseling, when you're having family building classes, when you're doing things with the youth group, when you're providing a stable environment for kids. You're doing so much just by doing the really simple things that you're called to do. But when we talk about somebody who's vulnerable, if you want to think about this with somebody thinking of a 14 or a 15-year-old child, their father's not in the picture anymore, they're facing poverty, maybe they've been experimenting with drugs or alcohol. It could be any or all of those things. Maybe they've been exposed to pornography, or they've been exposed to abuse or neglect. And they are going into survival mode. When somebody's in survival mode, the things that we take for granted every day, we get to choose what we want to do every day. And what we want to do usually outweighs what we have to do. We live in a pretty rich society. But when somebody's in survival mode, those scales get tipped and they end up thinking of things that they would never do as things that they have to do just to survive. So if you're a 14 or a 15-year-old kid and you're on the streets, you've been exposed to the drug culture, you've been exposed to the culture of free sex. There's nobody trying to give you guidance or help you. And somebody comes along and says, this is your solution. You think that's all that you could do to survive. It's going to tip those scales. So we want to be really careful when we're dealing with somebody who's in survival mode, to give them lots of options. Like, giving people options is the key to their freedom. We take that for granted every day, that we open our refrigerator and we have 4 to 10 different items to choose to consume, just to have a drink when we open our refrigerator. When somebody's on the street and they feel like they have to do something to survive, they don't get those kinds of choices. They don't even have $1, or can you even buy a soda in a gas station for $1 anymore? It's probably $2, right? So to be on the street and be trying to survive as a runaway, or somebody who's been exploited, or somebody who's already had experience in the culture of the commercial sex industry, they really feel trapped in what they have to do. They don't understand those options. So the survival scale is tipped in favor of the traffickers. And who are traffickers? When we're talking about somebody vulnerable being exploited, what kind of a mindset would be behind somebody that would take advantage of a young person or a vulnerable young adult and exploit those vulnerabilities? This is a quote from an actual trafficker, and I hope that this helps you understand how a trafficker actually sees the victims that they're looking for. This is all about money. Traffickers are business people. They have no concern or compassion for the person on the inside. They're looking at the bottom line. And unfortunately, a young, vulnerable person can be sold over and over and over again in the commercial sex trade. The demand is high, the risk is low, and so a trafficker is just doing what they think they have to do to survive. They are getting into this game. They think of it as a game where the more that they can make somebody else make money and the less that they have to do, they're winning. So they're going to do whatever they can to target vulnerable people, whether it means creating a vulnerability, creating a dependence, sometimes through drugs. That's often a way that traffickers don't only groom, but also control their victim, is by getting them addicted to drugs, and then they're the source of drugs for that victim, and they keep going back over and over and over again to get that supply of drugs. And when the trafficker sees that the time is right, they say, this isn't free anymore, you're going to have to earn it. So that's one example of ways that people that are vulnerable could be trafficked by somebody who only sees them as a source of income or a resource to make more money. So how much money are we talking? What would it be worth to somebody to exploit another person and treat them like a slave? There's a local pimp, a local trafficker, and pimp is just a 4-letter word for trafficker. A local trafficker was quoted, and this was within the last couple years. I pulled it out of an online article, I think through the Dallas Morning News. On my best day, I made $20,000. So raise your hand if you've made $20,000 in one day. How about this? What if you make $1,000 in one day? That's $365,000 a year for a trafficker who's not even doing the work. They're sitting in the background making the victim go earn the money. 360, there might be somebody on this call tonight. There might be one of our Facebook friends. If you're making $365,000 a year and you need a tax write-off, I know of an amazing nonprofit that you could send some funds to and get a tax write-off. because Deliver Fund is 100% driven through donations. So if you think that $365,000 tax-free through criminal enterprise, that money is not being spent to build bridges, to build schools, to make sure your community is safe and protected. That money is going back into the black market to buy drugs, to buy guns, to do other illicit activities. Most traffickers have a $1,000 quota. Well, I can't say most. I haven't interviewed more than 50% of the traffickers in our country. But I'll say oftentimes we hear that traffickers set their victims' quotas at $1,000 or more a day. So if a trafficker has 1 or 2 or 3 young people out there on the streets working for them, posted online in ads working for them, and they're making just $1,000 a day, if the trafficker just has 1 victim, they're making $365,000 a year. 2 victims, it's over $500,000. 3 victims, it's over $1 million a year. So this is really big money. And when you're talking about the amount of money involved, it kind of makes sense that somebody would take that kind of a risk. What doesn't it? And without law enforcement being properly trained on how to build a case against a trafficker, they have a very low risk. So that's where Deliver Fund comes in. We come into the situation, we train law enforcement, we don't just train them, we give them tools and resources so that they can build rock solid cases with data instead of relying on victim testimony to put the trafficker in prison. And then we advise them and work with them step by step through the whole process. So that's where we introduce risk into the equation. But where does all this money come from? Where does this $1,000 a day that a trafficking victim is being required to earn come from? And this image is taken from a Michigan sting, and this was, I think, 2018. So I want you to really look at these pictures. Look at these faces. Now, trafficking victims can be male or female. They can be from any socioeconomic background. They can be from any community. Traffickers can be male or female. I've had male traffickers and I've had female traffickers. But there is one common thing that every single person who paid to rent me had in common, and that's that they were male. Every single one of them. 99% of sex buyers are male. It's not often that somebody will be sold as a human trafficking victim and a female buyer will come along. So you'll look at these faces and you'll see that they're every different background, they're every different age. Some of them might be married, some of them might have kids. Some of them might have good jobs. They probably all have some kind of disposable income because they're using money in an illicit way. They're willing to break the law and do something nefarious and something illegal. But now I want you to put yourself in the shoes of that 14 or 15-year-old young girl who's run away from home because she wasn't getting along with her parents, or her parents split up and there was a crisis at home. So now she's on the street, she gets picked up by a trafficker, he shows her how she can make some money, gets her hooked on drugs, she's in a hotel room, and this is the image on the face on the other side of the door in the hotel room that she's being held in. Which one of these faces would you be excited to see? Which one of these men, when they knock on the door and you open the door and you're a 15-year-old child, which one of them is going to say, oh, wait, I can't do this. You're just a child. You're just a young girl. I'm going to help you. I'm going to rescue you from this situation. That's not happening. Instead, the people who come to that hotel room, see that she's young, she's small, and she's willing to do whatever they want in exchange for money. And she doesn't tell them any different, because there might be a violent person controlling her. There might be a drug addiction controlling her. There might be fear that she's going to go to jail controlling her. There's going to be guilt and shame controlling her. And she's not going to ask for help from any of them. And every one of those people who comes into that hotel room or answers that ad online are reinforcing the lies that she should be filled with guilt. She should be filled with shame. But I have good news again. The church is the answer to this. The church, we have the solution. We teach men to be heroes, right? We have access. We can talk to these guys. They might live in our neighborhoods. They might have kids that go to school with our kids. They might work in the same places that we work at. They might play golf with our husbands. We have an opportunity to reach them before they get so desperate that they go look for intimacy in that back alley hotel. We might be able to reach them and give them hope and give them the solution, right, to the intimacy that they're looking for. And if you're a believer, then you know, like I do, that one relationship answers all of the issues from all the other ones. So as the church, we're also the solution for this one. We're also the solution for the guilt and shame. Because helping people heal from guilt and shame, that's our specialty, right? That's what we are really, really good at. And I hate shame. Shame is not a part of my game. I pray for these men. I believe that they'll get, I want them to be held accountable for their actions, but I believe that they can be set free. I believe that they can be healed. And I think that this guy, I'm going to shake his hand someday. Jonah says it best. And I'm not interested in a world where men really want to watch porn, and I'll insert in my parentheses, or buy sex or rent a body, but they resist because they've been shamed. I'm interested in a world where men are raised from birth with such an unshakable understanding that women as human beings, that they are incapable of being aroused by their exploitation. I believe that this is possible. I believe that if the church is going to provide solutions and be a part of the justice movement, then our motivation has to be speaking life. And yeah, some of the facts might be kind of ugly, but what Jesus went through on the cross was pretty ugly. And he was raised to life. So if we can look at this ugly mess and we can start speaking life in the midst of it, and that's with anything with the justice movement. If we can look at the ugly mess of racism and we can start raising the banner of love and speaking life, we are the solution. If we can look at the mangled mess of a baby in a trash bag and look at abortion and say, we're going to speak life. We speak life into that dark situation. We impact hope immediately into the situation. The thing that the enemy is trying to use in darkness to bring destruction, we get to bring hope, and we get to change the atmosphere. We get to teach about accountability. We get to teach about healthy boundaries. We're the ones that get to talk about true intimacy and about women as human beings and about men as heroes, and that we all have inherent value, being created in the image and the likeness of the one true living God. We get to set the tone of these conversations. So let's look at how traffickers and the local church share some of the same assignment, right? So traffickers are out there and they're looking to recruit. They're looking on social media. They're just waiting for somebody to overshare. They're waiting for a young person to say how fed up they are with their parents or how fed up they are with their situation. They're looking for a girl to pose in her selfie with her lips out and everything perfect, begging for some attention. The traffickers are out there combing the internet right now looking for that. They're looking for the people on TikTok that are looking for attention, and they give them plenty of attention. That's how they recruit, and that's how they groom. But as the church, we're on the other side. We're in the light. We're not working in the darkness. We get to be in the light, evangelizing and making disciples, right? This is my story. I was in the darkness. I was recruited and groomed by human traffickers. But then when I found out about this man named Jesus and about his love for me and about the hope that he provides and about the new story that I could live, somebody came and evangelized to me. It was a simple choice for me to give my life to him. And then while traffickers might groom and they might control with drugs and with manipulation, when I got discipled in the church, there were no anti-human trafficking ministries. There were no victim-centered care centers. There was nothing designed for girls like me who had been sold as sex slaves. I just went to ladies' Bible study. Like, they taught me how to do Bible study and how to pray and how to write in my journal, because that's what Christians do, right? They taught me how to read my Bible. They taught me to show up on Sunday morning, and Wednesday night they taught me to go to the convention or the conference, because it was a special time. If you dedicate a weekend and you put your money and your time aside and seek the Lord, he's going to meet with you in those places. I got discipled by going to baby showers and going to potlucks on Sunday afternoons. I learned what it looks like to be a Christian and to act like one. Now, I don't always act like one. I'm still a work in progress. I am not perfect, and I'm learning more every day. That's why I keep reading, because there's more hope in that book every day. I open up the pages, and it's speaking life to me every day. In the same way that in the darkness, every day the lies of the enemy were telling me what I should think. Now I'm reading the scriptures and it's telling me who I really am and giving me true safety, giving me a true place to belong. I'm in the family now, right? And the created dependence that exists from a trafficker is stark comparison to the true interdependence that we have as the body, right? I mean, we can't work without each other. The body needs each other. We need to work together. And Ephesians tells us how we can't be the image of Christ to the world without each other. And so this is good news, church. We offer the truth. We're in the light. And just by you doing what you do, you're part of the solution. Don't get so caught up in the hype and the pressure that comes with thinking, oh, I've got to create a program, or I've got to say something with human trafficking, or I've got to do something that's victim this or survivor that. Just be the church. Have Sunday school classes. Invite people who are vulnerable to come to the Sunday school classes. Don't worry about what they're wearing. Don't worry about what they smell like. Don't worry if they have issues. Help them get to where they need to be. Help them get to where you know that the Lord has a plan for them to get to. He'll clean them up. He'll work out all those details. And this is something that only the church can do. I don't know of any other group. I've spoken to the Rotary Club. I've spoken to the Kiwanis Club. I've spoken to the women's clubs. I've stood on stages at universities. I've spoken before many different groups, but I don't know anybody else who has the ability to go before the creator of heaven and earth and the entire universe on behalf of the creation that he loves most and ask for his help and ask for his favor and ask for his healing. We have an awesome, amazing privilege, an amazing ability to interact with him on behalf of those who he has chosen to set a little higher than the angels. Like, he loves when we come to him and talk to him about his kids. He loves it. So when you're going to pray, you can get this prayer sheet off of my website. It's free on my website. So go and download it, print it off, share it on social media. When you're praying for people to receive healing, you're moving the heart of God. I mean, this shapes the world that we live in, right? When you're praying for justice, you're praying for Deliver Fund, because we are enacting justice. When you pray for the buyer to have a heart change, I have been in the red light district and I have been praying and watched the buyer turn around and leave without getting what he came for. The conviction of the Holy Spirit comes on people, and it can drive them to their knees. It can drive them home to their wives to repent. They can pick up the phone and call their pastor from the parking lot. Like, praying for the situation to change is doing a lot. Pray for the darkness to be exposed. Pray for resources. Organizations like Deliver Fund, you can look at our Guide Star. You can see how responsible we are with every single dime that is entrusted to our organization. When you're going to provide resources, pray first and then make sure that that group is doing the right thing with the money, and that there are tangible things being accomplished with that investment. Pray for the children to be safe. Pray for politicians and judges who are in positions of authority to not only be righteous in their own heart and in their own lives, but for them to do things and enact righteous policies and enact righteous judgments on the earth. But pray for that culture change. Pray for workers like me. Pray for me, please. It's been over 10 years. Some days it's hard. Some days this work is heavy and hard. Some days I have to unplug. I have to go recharge, because sometimes it's overwhelming. And working with survivors and working with victims and hearing the pain and hearing the extreme things that they've been through, it is heartbreaking every time. Pray that the church will accept the call to serve the orphans and widows. Y'all, we don't need big programs. We don't need flashy buildings. We don't need stages with fog machines. I like fog machines. I like worship. I like the environment. But we don't really need that. You know what we need? There's one kind of religion that the Lord says that he requires. Everything else makes him sick. Serve the widows and orphans in their time of need. Hey, when I was a little orphan and my mom was a widow, we had a really hard life. We really could have used the local church at that time. And no shame, I'm not putting any guilt on anybody on this call or that can hear this. But I think of that today as now I'm the church. Is there a single mom in my neighborhood who I could be reaching out to and extending hope to? Are there kids in my community that are fatherless that could use the covering and the protection of somebody who could help them? That's what the local church's job is, right? And I truly believe that we can make a difference in this fight. We all can really do something. I mean, praying is something. Praying is a big thing. Praying is a big thing. We have at Deliver Fund, we have a intercessors prayer meeting. And if anybody on this call wants to be a part of that, reach out to me through social media or go to my website and send me an email, and I'll make sure that you're a part of our prayer team. I sent out a few to my personal prayer team to pray about this call tonight. So I personally need prayer as well. And this is a movement or a part of the movement that I've been managing or overseeing about disrupting the demand. And I believe that we can change the culture when we teach people about the demand and how the demand drives the sale and how the demand drives the industry of commercial sexual exploitation. What if we had a culture where boys today grew up to be men who couldn't even fathom the thought of paying or buying or renting somebody for companionship? Like, really, that's a crazy thought. But what if we had a whole generation? What if we changed an entire generation that there was no more demand? I believe we can do it. I believe that we can change a culture in one generation. And you might not believe me. You might think that this is something too big. But I'm telling you, we've already done this. We've already changed our entire culture, the behavior of an entire community in one generation. Let me ask you this. What's the first thing you do when you get in your car before you pull out of the parking lot? Before you back out of your driveway? Do you put on your seatbelt? Right? We all put, you better say you put on your seatbelt. There might be cops on this call. We put on our seatbelts. That's like the first thing that we do, right? But have you always done that? Let me ask you this. Did your parents always wear their seatbelts? No. I remember being a little kid and this was my seatbelt. Like, it would stop me from going through the windshield if we hit the brakes, right? Because seatbelts weren't always required. But we had a public service campaign, a public awareness campaign, and it was twofold. On one side, all the billboards said one of two messages. On one side, it might say, buckle up for safety, right? Because we're putting the person at the center of the message, and we're saying, we want you to be safe. We want you to arrive home in one piece. We don't want to scrape your brains off of the pavement. We don't want to have to call your family and tell them you didn't make it home because you weren't wearing a seatbelt. Buckle up for safety. Caring about a person. But on the other sign across the highway, it might say, click it or ticket. Click it or ticket. If you don't wear your seatbelt, you're going to get a ticket. You're going to get pulled over. You're going to have to talk to the police officer. You're going to have to get a ticket. You're going to get points on your license. There's going to be all of these consequences for not wearing your seatbelt. So if we could, in an entire generation, a whole nation's behavior was changed through the simple messaging of buckle up for safety and click it or ticket. If we can do that over something as seemingly silly when we're comparing as seatbelts to human beings, children in your communities being sold for sex, I think that we can do this. I think we really can change the culture, because no little girl wakes up and says, someday I want to grow up and stand on a street corner or have pictures and movies made of me sold online. No little boy grows up and says, I just want to be like a monster, consuming images and people. That's not the world that we live in. And if we can change our culture by disrupting the demand, by saying we're not going to allow that pornified culture to influence our kids, we're not going to buy into this myth that sex sells, that that's how you have to do things. I truly believe that we can disrupt the demand and change the culture. And like I said, I had huge culture shift in my life just through simple Sunday morning stuff, just through the Bible studies and the fellowship, being taught how to pray, being taught how to read the word. Those things made an unbelievable impact, an eternal impact in my life. So here's some more resources that you can get on my website. If you've got little kids and you want to start these conversations about how to be safe online, this is just simply a tool to help you start that conversation. But I'm not going to be there to have the conversation and to walk it out. I'm not able to be there to teach you how to be a mom or a dad or an aunt or an uncle or a big brother or a big sister. That's work that you're going to have to put in, but I'll provide you some tools. So this first one on the left helps little kids. It's like an iPad, because that's what we all do, right? We give the little kid the iPad and then they go on YouTube or whatever, they play their games. But this spells something out. So when you're sitting down with like maybe a 6-year-old or an 8-year-old, help them spell this out. Don't be fooled. See how the app spells something? By the traps of bad guys online. So this will help you talk to them in a non-threatening way about being safe online. We don't want to scare them. We don't want them to be scared of using an iPad, but we want them to understand that we, just like we don't let them run out into the street, we want them to know that there are safety precautions that we want to make sure that they're aware of. And then the one on the right that looks like an iPhone, that is teen tested, teen approved. My teenage nieces helped me develop that tool. And I guess the first one was lame. So I had to get some advice from them on how to make it cool. So it's like a concerned adult texting with a teenager. And this is all it is, guys. This is it. Just be that safe person for a teenager to talk to. And it's not an if anymore, it's a when. Those teenagers are online and they start getting solicited, or they start getting images that they didn't ask for, or they start getting made offers to do things for money, then you're going to have a relationship with your teenager, with the teenager that you care about, so that they trust you to come talk to you about it when they're put in those difficult situations. So unfortunately, in the world we live in, it's not if, it's when. And then here's some other flyers that I have on my website: fast facts for parents and teachers, conversation starters. And then these are some of the conversation starters we just shared through Deliver Fund social media. If you're not following us on social media, you should. We have an amazing social media team, and they are doing really great things, really releasing some great content. So we recently released some of these, and this is good. If you have people you can practice with, sometimes it might make it easier if you practice some of these questions before you sit down with your teenagers, so it kind of feels a little more natural to you. But these are just open-ended questions that start a conversation. Instead of saying, if you do this, I will punish you and take your phone away, that creates a split in the family. That creates a reason for a teenager not to want to tell the person that's trying to help them what's really going on. So instead of that, start asking some conversations about what's really going on in their life. Like, what would you say if a stranger asked to take a picture of you? Now, what if it was a really good-looking stranger, like at the mall or at the movies or something, and he came up to you and he's like, dang, girl, you should be a model. You're so pretty. Let me take your picture. Now, that's a real technique that a real trafficker used, and he would look for girls, 12, 13, 14-year-old girls at the mall who were one at a time or two together. And he would go up to them and say, you're so pretty, you should be a model. And if those girls went, oh my God, I'm not pretty. You think I'm pretty? He knew that she had a low self-esteem, and all he had to do was buy her some sexy clothes, get her some makeup, take some pictures of her, put her online, and show her. Overnight, she would have 100 people or more telling her how sexy she was. And so he answered that little vulnerability of her being insecure. And let me ask you this: what 13-year-old, what 14-year-old girl do you know who isn't insecure about the way that they look? That's a trafficker is looking for that tiny bit of a vulnerability to get in and start exploiting. So we've got to have these conversations. If we're going to protect our kids, we've got to be the safe adults in those kids' lives, okay? And I truly believe that every man has a hero's heart just waiting to come alive. We need more men who are valiant warriors. We need more men who are out there making a difference, standing up in the face of a pornified culture and saying, not in my community, not on my watch, not if I have anything to say about it. Are the young people in my world going to be exploited? Are people going to be put out on the auction block for sale? And going back, if you need those resources, get on the website. But going back to this whole abolition issue, y'all, I hear a lot of people say, I wonder what I would be doing if I lived in the days of Abraham Lincoln and the Civil War. Well, whatever you're doing right now, you're doing it. And the fact that you chose to come to this Zoom call is encouraging. This is where the true difference is made, in backroom meetings and getting together in spite of the circumstances, setting aside time and resources and attention and putting them towards an issue that we want to see true societal change brought. When we were looking at abolition during the slave trade, and today there's more people being sold than there were during the times of legal slavery. If you want to see how the true difference was made, it was in backroom meetings like this. It was when a small group of people got together and made a decision that they were not going to stand for their communities being hurt any longer. And they did something about it. So if you want those resources, if you want to get copies of the books that were mentioned at the beginning of the call, if you want to schedule another speaking engagement, you can get on that website and find all of those links. And I really want to close with a little bit more about Deliver Fund. I'm so honored and so blessed to be a part of this team. And we do train, equip, and advise law enforcement in how to hunt, arrest, and prosecute human traffickers with a 100% success rate. We are the only organization like this of our kind. There are others that try to compare to us, but I've been in this work for, as I said, over 10 years, over a decade. And it wasn't until I found Deliver Fund, or I don't know if they found me, I guess when the CIA calls you or former CIA calls and you answer, right? So when I found out about this organization, it was an honor to even be considered to be a part of this team. These are elite trained people from special operations, from the CIA, from NSA, from the FBI, Navy SEALs, parajumpers, pararescuemen from the Air Force. And they are using their skills and talents to train law enforcement. If you're a local law enforcement agent, you don't have access to this level of training unless it's brought to you through Deliver Fund. And the best part of what we do is it's at absolutely no cost to that local law enforcement department. So another solution that the local church might be able to provide is a church group could sponsor their local detective to go through our training class, and then they're equipped with the training, and then they have access to the tools and the resources that we've designed, and they can make sure that trafficking is not happening in that community, in that local church's community. The state-of-the-art technology and the special skills that we allow to be used by the local law enforcement is what really makes a difference, because that's boots on the ground. Those are people who can go and rescue a victim right now. You and I cannot go rescue victims. And if there's an organization that tries to tell you they're rescuing the victims and they're not law enforcement, it's illegal. If it's a minor, it's kidnapping. And if it's somebody who didn't want to be rescued, it's not rescuing. So law enforcement's the only ones who can go remove a victim from a trafficking situation. And other organizations need to exist. The organizations that are providing services for victims need to exist. The other organizations that are providing rehabilitation and housing for survivors, those are very important organizations and they need to exist. But when you look at the grand scale in the last 10 years, what I've seen in this field, we spent a lot of time raising awareness. And that's like running around telling everybody we're at war. And then over the last 5 years or so, there's been a plethora of organizations come on the scene that are providing services for victims. And I would compare that to, if we're at war, that's pulling the wounded off the battlefield and putting them in hospitals. That's the triage. And that's a very important step in bringing an end to human trafficking. But Deliver Fund is very targeted at the enemy. We are going after the enemy. And unless you take the enemy out, you cannot win the war. So I believe that the work that we do is extremely important. It's life-saving, and we are literally using the enemy's technology against them. If a trafficker touches the internet, we can and will and do find them. And then we help law enforcement to execute search warrants, whatever they have to do to take down that trafficker. So we're also we built the International Human Trafficking Analysis Center. I have to read that off because it's a mouthful. We call it the ITAC for short. And it is a database for collecting, integrating, and analyzing human trafficking intelligence. So it's kind of like a clearinghouse for all of the human trafficking information throughout our nation, and it has international capabilities. That's housed right here in Dallas. That's in the former offices of Backpage, where a technology company used to use that space to sell children for sex. Now we are empowering law enforcement to take out the enemy, to really go and execute justice. So if that's not a solution, I don't know what is. I get really fired up talking about the work that we get to do with Deliver Fund. And I'm going to close by sharing with you that I have a friend, and she says that she believes that Deliver Fund is vetted by God. And after going to work in those offices and getting to work with the staff, I would have to agree with her. We bring hope, we impact the local community in a practical way, and we build lasting change. And so I cannot thank you enough for giving us this space, for allowing me the opportunity to address your congregation, for allowing the opportunity to address the people that joined us through social media and on this call. And I'm looking forward to seeing how we can work together more in the future, as y'all are doing great work at Bentry. And I'm very encouraged by the impact that y'all are having on the local community as well. So thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Sandy. I would like to open it up for a few minutes if you've got some time for some questions. I saw one question that came through, and someone was wondering how much does it cost for law enforcement to take the training that you mentioned?
Yeah, so it's free for law enforcement. Like, we don't charge law enforcement to go through our training. But if we have somebody sponsor their local law enforcement agent, it would be, now don't quote me on this, you can send me an email, I'll get the answer and respond with an actual number, but I think it's like $8,000 a year, but $16,500 the first year, because they get access to all the licenses for all of the technology as well. So the training that we provide is victim-centered, victim-informed training. We also provide that high-level training through the former CIA agents, the former law enforcement agencies, high-level law enforcement agencies. So it's a very specialized training package that we've created, and access to the tools and resources. So it's everything from classroom training to interactive training to even, what's the word for it? Like hands-on, let's say hands-on training. There was some tackling in the room at the appropriate time. They were taking each other down and practicing like kicking indoors. So it's really exciting to be a part of the training, but I do what I do best in those times, and I just work on the victim-centered training and interacting with victims, and that's an aspect that we bring to our training that I think is really unique. So to answer the question, though, it's between $8,000 and $16,000.
Excellent. Thank you. Does anyone else have a question for Sandy? You can unmute yourself or type it in the chat box and I'll read it for you.
Sandy, I know you've got the 2 of the 3 books available. Can you give us just a brief description of them?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. That was Greg, right? Thank you. So my first book, if you want to read them in the order of progression, the first book is Becoming Navi. And so that's about child trafficking. I write in a way that I hope covers the heart of the reader so that you don't get completely destroyed by the pain that's involved with child sex trafficking, but instead it offers a lot of hope. It offers a lot of encouragement, and the style of writing makes it easier to engage with the story. So it's a good way to see how child trafficking could be happening all around you in your communities, and it just opens your eyes to some things maybe to look for. And then that story leads into Hello Navi, which is kind of like the middle of the journey, and talks about what human trafficking looks like on the streets. So how somebody could go from being a victim of child abuse to being on the streets and being recruited and sold by a trafficker. So it gives you a really good understanding of what that progression might look like and how drugs and control and manipulation might have a play in that as well. And then the book that is coming out later this year, hopefully sooner rather than later. We're still waiting on some cover design, and then it should be out within the next month or two. It tells the story of the commercial sex industry, like I call it the industry of commercial sexual exploitation. So it includes a more deeper dive into strip clubs and the intersection of what might be seen as the sex trade that's legal, but where the lines get blurred and somebody involved in the sex industry could be being sex trafficked at the same time. But I will say, because I'm addressing the church tonight, that in every book there's hope, and the hero in the story is always going to be the Lord. Now, none of my books say Jesus, none of them say God. I believe that they were written in a way that somebody that's not a believer could read and still pull a lot of hope and be encouraged by. And I never want to push the Bible down anybody's throat. But hey, that's my story, right? So he's going to be on every page. And that's where the hope comes from. I'm actually writing another book right now about grief. My husband's family we've went through a really hard season. And so I'm writing a similar style, but stories on grief. So hopefully, if nothing else, Hello Navi, Becoming Navi, and Goodbye Navi will encourage people, help them see what trafficking really looks like, and give them some actual steps in how they can be part of the solution to end it. Thanks for asking that, Greg.
Thank you. And just one quick follow-up to that is, what would be the youngest age that you would think these books would be that how young of a child or teen or whatever do you think they would be appropriate?
I think it's a case by case basis. I know of somebody who gave them to their 11-year-old, and I was like, are you sure that an 11-year-old should read this book? And her 11-year, I mean, nothing that's said in the books is any worse or any more graphic than what's available through the media, through a cell phone to anybody at any time. But I would say it's a case by case basis. I have some family members who were raised in a small town, kind of off the grid almost. And so they were very innocent young ladies, and they waited until they were 18. Their mom waited until they were 18 for them to read the stories. So it's just a case by case basis. I would say that's a great way, going back to some of the resources that I shared earlier, that when you're developing those relationships and how you're talking with the teenagers in your life, that would be a good way to bridge that conversation. Like, hey, I read this book and it talked about some things that were kind of deep, or kind of, some things that we don't really talk about very often. Have you ever read any books about this? Let me show you some of this book and see if it's something that you might want to read, and then we can talk about it. So one thing about my books is I also included a lot of art in the books, because I think art is healing. And I think that expressing ourselves through art is very healing. The artist who I work with is extremely gifted. And some of the images themselves are really evoke a lot of emotion. And so that might be a good way to use the books, to talk to somebody that you're not sure if they're in a place to start reading them. Maybe expose them to some of the art and ask them for feedback and how they feel about some of that art. So that might be a good way to start it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. So Sandy, we have another couple questions here. One, we have a trafficking survivor that is joining us on the call here from Virginia. She is asking how she can know if her local precincts are trained to properly assist victims, or they're more victim-based. Do you have any idea what they can look for?
Yeah, that is a great question. And reach out to me personally, and I will see if we've done any training with that local municipality or with that local department. But yeah, we can definitely check into that. And victim-centered training, victim-centered care is really big now. And so as we're raising those standards, as Deliver Fund is raising the standard, and we're letting more and more people know about the services that we provide, we are having more and more requests. We have a training scheduled for later on this year. COVID notwithstanding, or I'm not sure exactly what it's going to look like. I know we had one planned in the spring and we had to cancel it, unfortunately, but we just had a call on Monday and we were talking about our upcoming training. So if they haven't been through, if your local law enforcement has not yet been through one of the trainings that we provide, there are opportunities coming up for those trainings. So you can go to my website and send me a personal email. You can email me through Deliver Fund at sandy.storm@deliverfund.org. Here, let's put that in the chat box. sandy.storm@deliverfund.org. I don't know why it's not. Oh, okay, hold on.
I gotcha.
Technical difficulties.
Sandy.storm. Okay, we both got it.
So you can send me an email and I will find out about the upcoming trainings and let you know how to get your local law enforcement there.
Perfect. Thanks for answering that question. We have another question here. What is Deliver Fund's biggest limitations to success?
Wow, that's a great question. So, and I was talking with Ellen before the call started, we have learned to pivot so many times this year. Like, we had to cancel all of our fundraising, we had to cancel all of our in person events. And so that was really difficult to learn how to pivot. And sometimes I feel like we're doing it 10 times a day. So, this year, we've had even more limitations than normal. Um, I think that we have such a big vision, and we have the right people and the right vision and the right process, but we just need like an unending bucket of money. So if we had that, then we could do all of the things that we want to do. And I think that's probably what every nonprofit would say. But for me as a general advisor to Deliver Fund, if I could be put in touch with the right donors and networked with the right people to talk to help them to see our vision and get behind investing in something that is making a true lasting difference in the lives of victims and truly bringing justice on the earth. Now, personally, my husband and I financially support Deliver Fund because we're that big of believers in this mission. So if we could reach a lot of small donors or just a couple really big ones, we have some really, my good friend Tommy Grover, if she hasn't presented at your class, you should go get her into your class. She's a representative through the governor's office. So I'm not sure if she's allowed to do something like this, but she would be great if she is. She talks about having big, hairy, audacious goals. And Deliver Fund has some big, hairy, audacious goals. We would like to knock down some walls, expand our office, and fill it with analysts that are 24/7, 365, interacting with law enforcement any time of the day or night, helping them immediately build those cases, get those search warrants, get those doors kicked in, rescue those victims. And that's what the ITAC is really helping to start providing. But it costs money to pay the salaries of all of those specially skilled analysts. It costs, electricity to have the computers going and to have a space for them, a dedicated space for them. So I would say those are some of the biggest limitations, but we're always looking for creative solutions. So I know that that the people that are joined in this group tonight, because we're talking to the church, that we were created by the Creator to be creative. And so I'm sure that this group has a lot of creative solutions, and I'm open to them. So hit me up on my email. If you can get me networked with other groups or with other opportunities to share our vision, that would be awesome. We'll do it digitally if we can't do it in person, right?
Yes. Nothing's going to stop us, right?
It's all online anyway.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of the trafficking is happening online. The sale is happening online, and then they're meeting in person. So when I go out into the red light district in the Dallas community, there's still obviously activity happening out in the streets. But just like we've been driven into our homes and we're working from home, traffickers are finding new ways to exploit vulnerable people through working through camming, through pornography. So trafficking hasn't stopped. It's evolving. Just like we're evolving on this in the light, the trafficking is evolving in the darkness. So Deliver Fund pivoting, we're evolving, and we're learning how to make the biggest impact and to help the most people.
Thank you so much, Sandy. This information and what you had to share was so impactful and so well spoken. I really appreciate you coming and sharing from your heart and challenging us, the church, to be the church and to take care of the orphans, the widows, and those that are stuck in this life. So thank you. Ellen, would you like to tell just a brief word about Set Them Free and then maybe close us out in a word of prayer?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So Bent Tree, our ministry is called Set Them Free, and Greg, Marie, myself, Alex, Clem, and Tate is part of our team. And we have been, I think, working together for coming on 3 years now. And we have speakers just like Sandy join us on the third Wednesday of each month at 7:00. And since March, we've been going virtual. So we also have a Facebook group called Set Them Free Bent Tree, where we post different articles and information going on. So feel free to join that. And then we meet on the fourth Saturday of each month and do outreach for a group called Poema Foundation. And if it's your first time, we meet 9 to 9:30 and do training. And then we break up into cars and we go out to hotels in the area. We have different routes, and each route goes to about 10 to 11 hotels. And we drive around the hotel and get different intel, information on the cars that we see that look suspicious. And then we also go in and take a flyer of the missing children in the area. And the good news is that the children that have been missing, we've had really good response and good turnout on finding the children. So that's a huge praise God for that, which is wonderful. Right now, during COVID, we have not been meeting on the fourth Saturday. We hope to get back maybe August or September. But if you follow the Set Them Free page, we will on Facebook, we'll continue to send out updates. So any questions on that before we pray? All right. And thank you guys all for joining us. Really appreciate it. And certainly, mostly thanks Sandy. Just how God is using you is just incredible to see. And, we're so appreciative of what you're doing and the work Deliver Fund's doing. So thank you.
Thank you. It's an honor. God bless y'all. God bless the tree.
All right. We will close in prayer. Dear Lord, this is such a heavy topic and so hard to hear and see what so many are going through and have gone through. But Lord, just this group that we have here tonight, we've had 3 people that have said they're survivors, and praise God for that. Somebody helped them, somebody showed them you, Lord, I hope, and showed them that what is possible. Thank you for using each of their lives to help others and to show that there's life on the other side of this. Lord, I pray for Sandy and the work that she's doing with Deliver Fund. I pray that you will give them the resources that they need to accomplish the great things that they have in mind, working with law enforcement. Also pray for the victims, that they'll be rescued and restored. Lord, we pray for justice for the traffickers. And also just pray for an awakening, that more and more people become aware of this issue and are able to shine your light on it. We pray for the buyers, even the ones Sandy showed us earlier. I can't imagine the hurt and the darkness that must be in their hearts, Lord. Pray for them that they will discover you and see that life can be different. Thank you, Jesus, for this time. I pray that you'll bless all of us and for a good evening. And thank you, Lord, for Sandy and the work she's doing. In Jesus' name, amen.